السنة مثل سفينة نوح، من ركبها نجا ومن تركها غرق.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله، وكفى بالله شهيدا، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. As to what proceeds, after praising Allah, the Most High, separate from His creation, in a manner which befits His Majesty, with love and veneration exclusively for Him, and after seeking from Allah to send His salatu was salam upon His final Prophet and Messenger, Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Qurashi, we meet once again for our weekly meeting to finish off the preface or the madkhal before starting to study the book Al-Usul ath-Thalathah, known as the three fundamentals or the three foundations or the three principles, illustrated by the Mujaddid of his time, Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad ibn al-Wahha, rahimahullah ta'ala. The preface includes adabu talib al-ilm, the etiquettes or the manners of a student of knowledge, fadail of seeking knowledge. So today we're going to start with the issue of things to remember when taking notes. So a student of knowledge, when he or she starts to study or read about a new field of study, before they start to study, they should know the layout and important books of that subject, as well the ones most suitable for that student of knowledge. So before you start to seek knowledge in a particular area, in a new field of study, you should know all the important books that have been illustrated on that subject, and then you should know which book is the most suitable one for you. The way to that is by asking someone who is already familiar with such things. For example, a teacher, a shaykh, somebody who has studied. So every field or discipline of study consists of three types of books. I believe we have covered this, in which you should never stop reading about a particular field unless you have read a book from each. Firstly, a book that is considered to be a main source in its field. Secondly, a comprehensive book that gathers all its topics. Thirdly, a book that lays out the history of the field of study. So for example, the book Al-Kifaya by Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi is considered a main source in its respective field. And Ulum al-Hadith by Ibn Salah brings together all the topics of that field. Similarly, al-Risala by Imam al-Shafi'i Rahimahullah in Usul al-Fiqh, and al-Bahr al-Muhit by al-Zarakhshi, and a book that discusses the history of Usul al-Fiqh and so on. So whenever you read about any subject, it is appropriate to never move on to another, or when you study a subject, it is not appropriate for you to move on to another until after reading these three types of books. So every field that we have, you can ask the people of knowledge and they will tell you. And that's how a student of knowledge should behave. We've been through a lot of things in detail, but you've got to keep in the back of your mind, before you start to study a subject, there's three types of book of each area or field or science that you study. You've got to be familiar with them. And also when you start to study a topic or a subject, you need to ask the experts or those who have studied before you to point you to the right direction, that you select the right book for studies. Now, with regards to how to take notes. So divide your kashkul according to your academic needs. For example, if you had specifically designated notebooks for taking notes, then divide these notebooks into categories. One for tafsir, one for hadith, one for biographies, one for fiqh. So for us now, we're studying three subjects. So we would have, we would have a notebook for each subject, one for Bayquniyya, one for Al-Usul ath-Thalathah, and one for ad-Durr al-Bahiyya. Or we would have them all together and have each section designated especially for that. If you major in a particular field of study, so for example, you're one of something which you are studying, a subject which you are studying is your major, then if it's a major, then you must assign a separate book for it and divide it according to the different areas of that speciality. So if you're studying a main subject like Aqidah, so in Aqidah you'll have Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Asma' wa Sifat, deviated sects and the history, and all the other things related. So that's an important point that you need to remember. When you are right at the beginning, when you're writing benefits, so you decide to write benefits from a lesson. If you decide to write benefits of a lesson, then you should have a corresponding title for it. For example, if today's topic is with regards to taking notes, and you're going to talk about the benefits of taking notes, then you can write the benefits of taking notes. When you write the notes or the benefits, write them completely, exactly the way you read it or you heard it from your teacher, as much as possible. Because this will help you revise. This will help you when you are revising from your notebook, enjoyable and beneficial. So a student of knowledge shouldn't summarize pieces of information or hint to the remainder of them. You should try to write them for word. But like I mentioned in our previous lesson yesterday, he can have keys which tell you from word to word. So another thing which the students should remember when they write their notes is that the title of the book you cite it from. So you don't have to write, sometimes book titles are quite lengthy, so you don't have to write the whole title, you can just write that which the book is known for. For example, Fathul Bari. Try to write the page number and the volume number. That's one thing that is important when it comes to note taking. The need for a pen while reading. Don't believe anyone who says to you reading with the pen at hand is boring. Don't pay attention to anybody who says this. I've mentioned this before. Rather, you shouldn't ever read unless you have a pen with you. So, when you are reading or when you are attending a class, you should not attend a class without a pen and a paper. It's very important that you attend a class with a pen and a paper or your electronic gadget. Because by having a pen, it allows you to write notes and beneficial information. Because not everything that you observe or everything that is transmitted to you, you remember. You may forget things. The next issue is ways to extract benefits from a book or from your lessons. Extracting benefits can be done by one of the two ways. One way is by writing down the main ideas and concepts of the lecture. Either if you have a book in the margins, and this is called the summary method, mukhtasar. The other way is by writing notes, useful information, quotations exactly as they are from the book. These two methods could both be used when summarizing a lecture or a book. For some books, only one of the two methods might be appropriate. But for lectures, you can either use this or use that. The next issue is if you've attended a lecture of your teacher and you've written on all the information and now you want to summarize the lecture. So these are some of the fundamental steps to summarize a lecture. The first step is called exposure reading. So you look at your notes, you read through it, you read through your notes thoroughly, and you pass by the contents of the lecture. This is the type of reading that the student of knowledge and researcher are in need of and is related to a topic that is probably being read about or being discussed. The second step represents distinguishing between the important concepts outlined in the first step and unnecessary information or things that could be omitted. So when you take notes from your lecture, you have everything that your teacher mentioned, and then the second step is to extract important concepts outlined. The third step is that when the writing of the summary is actually completed, by leaving the original text aside, which was the lecture notes, and writing the summary by covering all aspects of the ideas or the concept that was discussed. And then the fourth step is to compare the summary with the original text. So when you've had your summary and you've had your original lecture, which all the notes you took, you make a comparison. So you can see that preciseness is there, correctness is there, and the summary is adequate. And if there are any corrections that need to be made, you can make those and cross-reference. So these are some of the things that were, so I mentioned 4 steps. First step is called exposure reading. Before you summarize the lesson or the lecture, you read through it once to discover, and you pass by its contents. Students of knowledge, they usually do this. That's like a recap of the actual whole lesson or lecture. Second is you start distinguishing between the important concepts and important issues outlined in the first step, meaning in your actual lesson and lecture. and unnecessary information, things which you see, which you may think that this is not relevant to you. Then the third step is when you write the summary, when you've actually completed writing the summary, by leaving the original text aside, you make sure that the summary covers all aspects of the idea and the concept that is being discussed. And then the fourth step is to compare the summary with the original text, that you haven't missed anything out or you haven't written anything that may be wrong. So the preciseness and accuracy and being adequate and making the corrections is very important. The next issue which we are going to discuss is one of the issues that I had in mind. When you actually summarize your lecture, you must observe the following things: correct understanding, good delivery, meaning the notes that you took and the information that you gathered, and the correct objective. If you don't have these three things, then you're not going to have the right direction. You've got to have the correct understanding of the lecture, you've got to be able to have a good delivery, and you're going to have the correct objective of why you are summarizing these notes or compiling these notes. The first principle, which is the correct understanding, will safeguard you from wrong interpretations, and so that the summary is not based on something the Shaykh or the lecturer didn't originally intend. The second principle, a good delivery, limits your mistakes in conveying the original objective of the teacher, of the Shaykh. Have a correct understanding is not enough until it is linked with a delivery that carries its meanings, without any additions, no subtractions. So the eloquence of the tongue is something which is very great, has a great advantage, because it assists the person in correct understanding. The third principle is having a correct objective protects from the distorting the original intent of the Shaykh, normally caused by adding or taking away or altering the wording in a way that changes the meaning. So when you summarize your points, make sure that when you summarize, you don't alter the wording or distort the wording, or you take away something or add something more to it. And the more you summarize and the more benefits you derive, the more you experience and become more experienced, and the more you become precise and accurate. So these were some things which you need to look at when it comes to note-taking. I think we've covered quite a lot, and I think, inshallah, many of you will now be equipped and have a good concept of how to take notes. So I mentioned three, yes? Correct understanding, good delivery, and correct objective. A good delivery, it limits your mistakes in conveying the original objective of the Shaykh or the lecturer or the teacher. Good delivery. Having a correct understanding is not enough until it is linked with a good delivery. Good delivery means that it carries its meanings without any additions, no subtractions. This is good delivery, preciseness. So if you have a good understanding and you understand everything, but at the time of when you deliver this or summarize this or derive benefits, you're going to make sure that you don't subtract or you don't add anything to its content. So this was taken from various ulama that have written, like Shaykh al-Radadi and others, and one can refer back to the books for a detailed discussion. I'm going to talk about memorizing, because I find that a lot of students, they always ask, what's the best way to memorize something? You know, we are studying al-Bayquniyah, and if every single student would have just memorized one line of poetry for each lesson, by now most of the students that are attending would have memorized al-Bayquniyah. Problem that you students have from the West is that you're very lazy. You expect everything to be given to you on a plate. So I'm going to go through some important points that have been mentioned by Shaykh Abdul Muhsin al-Qasim. Imam al-Khatib of al-Masjid Nabawi with regards to memorization. I read his points and I found that they were quite frank and easy to follow and quite beneficial. So he says that the easiest way or manner for memorizing text is as following. The first thing that he mentions is consistency and regularity when it comes to memorizing. So it's not that 1 week you memorize 30 lines of poetry and then for the next 3 weeks you don't memorize nothing. There's got to be consistency and frequency when it comes to memorizing. The second point that he mentions is not to overburden yourself and to memorize more than that which you are capable or have the ability to do so. Meaning that you should have a set target, a set daily target for memorizing. And don't exceed that even if you're able to do so. The third thing is at-ta'anni fil hifz. When you memorize when your mind is relaxed. When your mind is relaxed, not when you're at a football game and you want to memorize. The best manner is that you memorize when you are relaxed and you're able to focus and concentrate. We've come through the statement of Imam al-Zuhri, rahimahullah ta'ala, where he said, إِنَّمَا جَمَعْنَا هَذَا الْعِلْمَ بِالْحَدِيثِ وَالْحَدِيثَيْنِ وَالْمَسْأَلَةَ وَالْمَسْأَلَةِ. He said that we were able to seek this discipline or this type of knowledge by learning 1 or 2 hadiths daily or 1 or 2 issues daily. So this was their set thing that they learned daily. So the text that you memorize may be text of hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It may be a poem, an ode, different types of composed text that we have. If you're memorizing hadith, then that which is recommended is that you memorize 3 hadith every single day. That's it, nothing more. If you're memorizing a ode like al-Bayquniya or something like that, if you're memorizing nathal, like an ode, yes, like al-Bayquniya, then you should not exceed more than 3 lines of poetry a day. So if you are to take this and are relaxed and you revise, then your memorization will become easy. Now the method of how, once we have agreed that 3 ahadith or 3 lines of poetry is going to be memorized daily, what's the method of memorizing? Repeat the appropriate appointed amount of text which you intend to memorize 20 times. And like I said, that the best time to memorize is before Salatul Fajr, which is the most best time, and after Salatul Fajr immediately. So that's during the early morning is your time allocated for memorization. Then after Asr or Maghrib, which is the evening, and that time is for you to revise which you have memorized again 20 times. So whatever you memorize, like today, when you start tomorrow, so tomorrow, before you start to memorize the new appointed amount of poetry, for example, 3, you read that which you have memorized yesterday 20 times. Then you read that which you are going to memorize, and then you start from the beginning till the end, and you do this every single day. So when you start this with every single day, so for example, after 5 days, you start from 1 all the way to 9 or 10 or 11 or 12. So whenever you have a new set of lines of memorizing, whatever you memorized before that, you repeat that 20 times, and then you start right from the beginning till where you have reached 20 times. And if you stick to this methodology, inshallah, then whatever you memorize will stay in your brain if Allah wills. One thing I need to stress is that a lot of people, they go to extremes. So there are those who only focus on memorizing but give no focus to its comprehension. And there are those who neglect memorizing and only focus on comprehension. The correct manner and methodology is to combine both things. To focus on memorization as well as comprehension. So we find scholars that they were very committed when they would memorize. For example, Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi would memorize something that he memorized 100 times. Just imagine. If you are to repeat something 100 times, it's impossible after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed it for you that you won't be able to memorize this. So 100 times, 70 times. And you should be aware of something which is very important when it comes to memorization. And that is repetitive revision. Not being consistent in that is going to be the cause of you forgetting that which you have memorized. When you memorize text, then try to memorize 2 pages every day. And then try to memorize that and then to repeat it 20 times. And then the next day, before you start memorizing something new, read that which you memorized yesterday 5 times. Then begin with the new set of page that you need to memorize from the text 20 times. And every single day you do this. So you start today, day 1, 2 pages, 20 times. The next day when you come, before you start to memorize your new text, you look at your old text and repeat it 5 times. Then 20 times the second day. Then the third day you come, you first do what you memorized on the second day, and then you do first day and second day. On the fourth day you come, you repeat that which you memorized on the third day, and then from the first day to the third day. Now, if you keep consistent in this way, then inshallah bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, you will be able to master memorization. So now we've covered note taking and we've covered memorization. Everybody should try to memorize. Make an effort. If you can't do 3 lines, then 1 line. Nobody should say that I can't. An effort needs to be put in. When it comes to muraja or revision. So for example, if you're memorizing on the 5th day, so before you start memorizing the 5th day, you go through what you memorized on the 4th day. And then you go and you revise that what you memorized on the 1st, 2nd, 3rd with the 4th. Then you start memorizing the 5th day. And then on the 6th you do the same, you memorize the 5th, and then from 1 to 4, then again a 5 again, and then move on to the 6th. Is that clear? So the more you repeat and revise, the more it becomes firm and strong, with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The best way to memorize, and the way we memorize the Quran, is we would get up before Fajr in the boarding school. At home, when I would get up for Fajr, my mom would wake me up, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless her and grant her good health. She would splash water on me. She used to have a spray. Still remember that spray, like a yellow bottle on it. She would spray that on me until I woke up, until I would angrily get up. And then I would come down and have my cornflakes. But this was my routine. I'm telling you my routine. So it'd be dark. And then she would tell me to pray Fajr. If it was in Fajr time, then I would sit down to memorize. Or if I woke up just before, if the Fajr time had started, then I would pray Fajr. And then I would sit to memorize. The method of memorization of the Quran is as follows. You recite the first ayah. For example, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. You recite this ayah looking inside the Mus'haf 10 times. How many times? 10 times. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Until a blueprint of that ayah sits in your head. When you focus, it starts. So now when I read Quran, it's like an electronic copy in front of me. It's like I have a picture when I'm reading from it. It's like I'm reading from it. So memorize this first ayah 10 times, looking inside. Then out of memory, you recite the ayah 5 times. So Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen 10 times, looking inside, 5 times. If you're an extreme weak student, then 10-10. 10-5 or 10-10. Then you move on to the second ayah, which is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Again, the equation of 10-10 or 10-5. After you have memorized the second ayah, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, you go back to the first ayah, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, 5 times looking inside, and 5 times by memory. Then you move to Maliki Yawmiddin, 10-5 or 10-10. And then Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, 10 times looking inside and 10 times by memory. Early in the morning. If you do this, if you're able to be patient and burden yourself with this, when you try this the first day, it becomes very difficult. But the more you practice this and the more you do this, it becomes faster and easier. You start to build that skill. If the ayats are long, then you split the ayat up at an appropriate place. You ask where to stop. And that's how you memorize the Quran. And then whatever you memorize in the morning, you revise that in the afternoon. So like I was mentioning, that those of you who are new to memorizations, you don't have to follow any particular rule of how much you want to memorize. You can start with 3 lines if you want, 5 lines if you want. I started memorizing the Quran with 2 lines. I remember the first day I went, I memorized 2 lines. And then I became accustomed to 3 lines. And then I moved to 5 lines. And then I moved to 7 lines. And then I moved to 10 lines. And the mushaf that we had has about 13 lines. And then I moved to a page. And then I moved to 1.5 page, 1 3/4 pages. And then I moved to 2 pages. And then I was consistent at 2 pages. Then I moved to 2.5. And then I moved to 3, 3.5, 4. So it's got to be a gradual process. You don't have to listen to anybody. You yourself know your strength and weakness and your ability. So you choose of how much lines you want to start with. But don't do what other people do by burning themselves out by trying to memorize 1 page every single day. You're gonna but you're gonna exhaust yourself. I remember that I don't know, I probably mentioned this before, that I got to a stage when I was memorizing something like 22, 23 pages a day. And I would only sit for about 2 hours. That's almost a juz in the version of the Mus'haf that I have. I remember that I had a record, and from what I've still heard, I've mentioned this before, the record has not been broken till this day in the boarding school where I went. Allah knows best. We're talking about almost 30 years ago. So that's very important when it comes to memorization. So memorizing is an important factor to grasp knowledge and to preserve knowledge. Because you may come across tons of principles, and you may have a ode that mentions all those principles, and if you memorize those principles, you'll be able to recall those principles by just uttering or saying the line of poetry. That's the benefit. For example, أولها الصحيح وهو ما اتصل إسناده ولم يشد أو يعل. That's given you أو يرويه ضابط عن مثله معتمد في ضبطه ونقله. So you know that there's 5 conditions of a hadith, but how to recall them? Once you memorize these 2 lines, you can easily, recite, stipulate, extrapolate, utter, and give the definition of a Sahih hadith because you've memorized the old. You see the benefit of memorizing. So it's very important that you strike a balance. You don't go to the extreme of memorizing so much text and understanding nothing, or you just focus on understanding and neglect memorizing. Both go hand in hand. There should be a balance, and there should be a moderate way that is chosen. So sabaq is called your new ayats of memorization. So whatever you memorize today, so today is Thursday. So whatever I memorized in Fajr and I'm going to recite to my teacher today, this is called sabaq. Yesterday's memorization along with your new memorization has to be set together. So you start from yesterday's, you recite that to your teacher, and then you also recite what you have memorized. Is that clear? So this is called sabaq, and your previous memorizations. And for example, you're memorizing the 4th juz, and you've done about half of the 1st juz. Then you have something which is called sabaq bara, we call it sabaq bara, which is that you recite from the beginning of the 4th juz all the way, including what you memorized yesterday and today for a second. So if you're on 8, you memorize what you recite, what you memorized yesterday, then what you have memorized today, and then from the beginning of 8 all the way till reach where you have memorized. So the current juz that you are memorizing is becoming firm and firm as the days go by, and preciseness and revision. So I remember, subhanallah, our teacher, he made our Quran so solid that if you were to drag me from my sleep and tell me to read from there, I would read from there. I can remember that when I was leading the Taraweeh prayer, the first time I led the Taraweeh prayer, I was only 14 years old. So the guys who were leading with me, after Asr, they would all be sitting in the masjid and they would be revising, and I would be out playing football, 5-a-side. Just outside the masjid, we used to have a match there. And just before the Taraweeh time, after breaking my fast, I would pick up my mushaf, I would look through a few pages, and I was ready. Why? Due to this mechanism and this revision system that our teacher had built, and we had implemented, that there was a time when I would read in one sitting in the presence of my teacher 6 juz non-stop. After 3 juz, he would give us a glass of water and some time to take a break, about 2 minutes, and then again. We got to the level, like remember I told you, half in one sitting, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 7. And I finished the whole Quran in 3 sittings, reading 10 juz to him. And he would fall asleep. You'd think he's sleeping away, snoring away, not knowing, but if you made a mistake, whoa, he'd wake up like Superman. This was in the UK. This mechanism that he built. That's why when I went to examine and have my exam for the Quran, and I told you that I broke the record, and that person, that examiner, never ever gave anybody 20 pounds. I was the one that collected that 20 pounds at that time. And this mechanism is a legacy and a mechanism that is known amongst the tahfidh, in many of the tahfidh where the Quran is memorized. I memorized the whole Quran in 1.5 years, alhamdulillah. I mean, the last 10 juz I did in less than 2 to 3 months. But that mechanism needs to be built, that consistency of the Quran. So when we talk about memorization, the most important thing for us when it comes to memorization is the memorization of the Quran. But one of the dangerous things that comes to memorizing is those who memorize without teachers. Don't memorize without teachers. There is a YouTube channel where there is a Shaykh from Egypt. He recites and then the children recite behind him. I don't know his name. It's quite famous. They use it, it's used everywhere. If you want to memorize something, then listen to that. Listen to him recite. So when he is reciting, have the Mus'haf open in front of you. Yes, I think it's Husar, and he is reciting, and then the children are reciting with him. So this is how so when I first started memorizing, I will read the whole page to my teacher, and he would correct my recitation. So don't memorize the Quran by yourself, because if you memorize the Quran with a mistake, then it will be extremely difficult to rectify that mistake, especially if you've said it 1,000 times. And that's the danger of memorizing the Quran to a teacher who has not memorized the Quran. That's why many of the Salaf would not take knowledge from a person who was a self-studied person when it came to the Quran. The dangers of it. Starting with the memorization. 20 lessons we took with regards to the etiquettes and the virtues of seeking knowledge and some of the characteristics that is to memorizing. Go back to these lessons and listen to them, reflect upon them, benefit yourself and benefit others. What I have presented to you, everything has been taken from the works of the scholars. Nothing from myself. Just explained and elaborated for you. Allah grant you success, elevate your status, make you serious students of knowledge. Knowledge which will be beneficial for you and for others, and bless you wherever you may be, and forgive your and my sins. That when we disperse today from this gathering, it will be a gathering which will be a gathering of whom Allah has forgiven everybody, and our slates become clean. So Allah, we ask you to forgive us. Forgive us for our shortcomings and our sins, and make us your sincere servants and slaves, and give us the true understanding of your religion, and protect us from the fitan that we can see in the West. For indeed Allah, you are Sami'un Mujibut Du'a. Jazakumullahu khairan. Remember me and my family in your du'as, especially my mother, my father, my in-laws who are sick. Allah grant them shifa. And also all our brothers and sisters whose parents are elderly in age and are sick. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them all shifa. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala elevate the status of every single one of you. Barakallahu feekum. Wa nafa'a bikum al-Islam al-Muslimin. Wa rafa'a qadrakum fi ad-dunya wal-akhirah. Wassalamu alaykum ورحمة الله وبركاته.